Good morning, everyone. I'm LogiGear's Marketing Manager, Christine Paris. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. This session is estimated to run 1 hour. Today's agenda will cover a lot of ground. First, Mike and John will talk about how DevOps practices drive business value by removing barriers to effective application delivery, as well as how software delivery pipelines can provide consistency and speed for continuous delivery. We'll also discuss how TestArchitect can help improve software quality and help you to effectively leverage existing team resources and decrease your operational costs. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please hold all questions until then. We'll answer as many as time allows, and we'll follow up with any remainder questions after the webinar. First, let's talk about TestArchitect. TestArchitect is a codeless automation test tool. It's an integrated test automation platform that focuses on scaling up test automation coverage and productivity. TestArchitect's integration with leading tools like Jenkins, Docker, Zephyr, and Microsoft Team Foundation Server help you seamlessly implement continuous testing in your organization. Now, let me briefly talk about Deliveron. Deliveron is a project-based consulting organization that has delivered business-driven technology solutions since 2006. Deliveron helps their customers in modern application development, cloud applications and solutions, DevOps enablement, and data analytics solutions. Finding a need to serve their clientele better when it came to delivering DevOps, Deliveron turned to TestArchitect to use in their consulting work. Deliveron's clientele have seen great success with TestArchitect for DevOps, so kudos to them and Deliveron. Now, let me introduce our featured speakers, John and Mike. John Weland is co-founder and solution consultant at Deliveron Consulting Services. John has over 20 years of industry experience in successfully implementing enterprise solutions across several vertical industries, including healthcare, financial services, professional services, and energy. John has regularly presented at several conferences including HTC, Infotech, and Microsoft CIO Summit. Mike Douglas is a solution consultant at Deliveron Consulting Services. He specializes in working with development teams to implement DevOps and application lifecycle management solutions to establish cohesive processes from requirements to deployments. Mike is also a Microsoft ALM Ranger and TestArchitect advocate. Now, let me pass the floor to Mike and John.
All right, so today we're going to talk about automated testing and continuous delivery. But it's important to understand how these critical capabilities, what they are, and what's driving the need behind them. So if you're an organization that's not modernizing your technology today, you're going to be left behind. Unless you're one of the lucky ones that's been born in the cloud and have all greenfield applications that you were able to bring on these practices, you're probably working with some legacy software and potentially some outdated IT infrastructure and hardware. And generally, that particular issue isn't a problem, but your competitors are that are born in the cloud, are very lean, agile, and able to leverage and be much more effective with the capital investments they have. So digital transformation is definitely a sweeping change, and it's changing how products are built, delivered, serviced, and so therefore CEOs have really prioritized this digital transformation as a real key initiative, and frankly, their top priority going into the coming years. So to understand what digital transformation is all about, it's important to look at it from not only being able to engage customers differently and creating more compelling software that brings them much closer to your business and services, but also creating solutions that drive innovation in the marketplace, as well as optimizing some of the back-end processes and operations you may have today for cost savings, as well as to boost employee productivity and morale. Where we see a lot of customers engaging with us today is transforming existing products and services to create new niches within the marketplace. And to do this, you have to leverage the technologies and the capabilities that exist to move faster in the market. Otherwise, your competitors will be. So what does this look like? Many of you may be familiar with Uber, who has transformed the transportation industry. They've combined not only technology capabilities, but delivered it to customers in a completely new way, and that's driven a niche in the marketplace that has enabled them to truly enable that or take advantage of that digital transformational efforts. If you have Amazon Alexa or Google Home or Cortana, you're probably familiar with these digital assistants, and they're creating a new way for consumers to interact with technology in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. And so this is creating new business opportunities for companies who previously didn't exist to leverage some of these not only hardware but software capabilities. And then we also have chatbots. These are a new way for us to engage with customers, and it brings some of our products and services in an automated way to our customers so we can provide that 24/7 support, and in some cases provide better customer interaction through the not only AI capabilities that these chatbots provide, but it provides a tool and a reliable solution for that constant and ever-changing need customers have for communication. So what's enabling the digital transformation? There's really kind of three key components of that. 90% of all the data was produced just in the last couple of years. And so the amount of data that's out there that companies are needing to try to get their hands wrapped around, a lot of the legacy tool sets just aren't sufficient for dealing with that amount of data. So cloud has provided us the capabilities to not only leverage big data solutions, but also out-of-the-box technology solutions to tie into that big data to allow us to process it not only quickly but efficiently, but gain new insights into that information. Where this all leads, and again, you see this represented by some of the digital assistants I just mentioned, we can now build applications that are providing intelligence based upon these big data initiatives and the cloud solutions to help drive not only customer behavior, but really help them make better decisions based upon what the products and services your organization is providing. So these are really kind of the three key enablers to this digital transformation. So the question now is build this software, build these intelligent applications, leverage big data and cloud. This is where now DevOps and continuous delivery really come to the table and showcase the value. So if we look at what is DevOps, to step way back, so in the early days when we were just trying to figure out how to build better software, we brought together the developers and the business partners much closely. And with Agile, we were trying to answer the question, how do I build the right software that meets the business needs? And so as our teams then learned some of those Agile practices and matured and started to scale out to other teams, then we started having to answer the question of how do I develop software with quality built in? And so this is where some of the ALM practices and engineering practices, ALM being application lifecycle management, really took precedent with a lot of the Agile teams and wanting to build better quality software. So as these business teams and developers and testers began working together much more closely and building software much faster, then the question became, how do I get this software that we're building very quickly out to customers more quickly? And that's where DevOps really began to take some of the spotlight, because it's answering the question of how do I deliver that software faster? And so we're pulling in IT operations into those teams that are creating the software solutions. So we really see DevOps as kind of being that next step in the evolution of both these Agile practices and these ALM quality and engineering practices. So it creates a new way of working. Again, if we look at what we did when we were developing software, following kind of that waterfall process, we did a lot of design up front. We did a bunch of coding for potentially several months at a time. And then we hurried up to try to get some testing incorporated before we had to hurry up and deploy. And so that created much longer time frames around getting software out to customers and creating that innovation. So we moved to Agile and we started designing, developing, testing, and we started doing that on much smaller iterations, which again gave us that software product that our business partners were looking for. And then maybe at the end of the release, we had a deployment where we then got it out to customers. So we were creating the software in much smaller iterations, but we weren't delivering that software to customers to capture that feedback. And this is what the DevOps picture looks like. So we're still designing the software, we're doing some of the development, testing, but now we're deploying. And we're deploying much more frequently, much smaller batches of software capability so that we can get faster feedback from the customers. It helps us with learning how they're actually using the software, and it helps us drive faster innovation with the software and services we have. So if we look at what does DevOps look like from a team standpoint, again, we're bringing together what we call delivery teams, and that's the necessary capabilities to build software from idea to production. We're all working off a unified backlog This incorporates not only the development aspect, but it's pulling together any of the supplemental capabilities to support that, from operational backlog items to UI UX backlog items. We also have feedback loops that are incorporated, and this is really a key component of what DevOps teams are working off of, is taking the feedback from not only production, from our customers, from our business partners, and letting that help drive how this software product is being created. And of course, if we're going to deploy software at much more frequent intervals, we have to have automation built in at every step and every stage that we have in place. And then once we get it out to production, we really want to be able to monitor our production environment so that we can do experimentation with software features and different capabilities to learn which ones customers like even better, and let that help drive how our software product is being created. And then last but not least, for us to be able to effectively deploy software to downstream to our dev, test, and production environments, we have to eliminate as many bottlenecks as we can. And so building infrastructure that supports our application and leveraging some of those technologies like the cloud capabilities to do that helps provide that speed of delivery with the quality built into that process. So that's kind of what it looks like from a team perspective. So how do we organize these teams? Again, the stable delivery teams, the team's going to sit together for a period of time, get to know and work with each other very well. But they have the capabilities and those skill sets that are needed to take those business and ideas and develop, test, and validate and deploy those all the way to production. So again, represents the skill sets necessary to go from idea to production. It's generally a cross-functional team, again, that can pick up and help out in various areas to keep progress and efficiencies moving forward. They also work under a shared understanding, which means that they understand the impact to the customers and that they all own that customer experience. And so this is kind of a very high-level overview of what some of the team composition can look like and the capabilities that are needed to help us build the right software with quality and get it to our customers faster. So when we think about enabling continuous delivery for these delivery teams, there's a couple of key aspects. We'll kind of walk you through what this looks like. So those stable delivery teams are building not only any of the user experience flows, some of the UI artifacts, they're writing code, they're building the infrastructure necessary to support that application, as well as they're building out some of the automated testing. All of this is being checked into version control, so we have history and visibility into the work that the team has. And this is where we want to spend most of our time from a team standpoint. This is where business innovation happens. So we want to try to maximize our time from a team perspective in this area. We kick off our automated builds from there, which we can run some of our quality checks, as we discussed earlier, from code coverage to any of the code analysis or vulnerability scans we may have against our application. We'll then check those into an artifact repro, which we can then pull from to not only provision our environments, provision the infrastructure, the application, and any of the automated tests that they're going to help us verify the functionality of the product we're creating. Once we get into this test environment, then we can run additional tests like some of our load tests, penetration testing, and any additional code profiling that we want to take advantage of. Once we get the green light out of our test environment, we can then move it down to staging and eventually production. When we're in production, then this is where we have some additional things that we can take advantage of, like being able to roll out various versions of the application to find out which of those versions do customers like working with, and that may be at a feature level. And then be able to monitor that usage and incorporate not only how well we're meeting SLAs, but how well the application is performing, and roll that into feedback loops. These feedback loops help influence that unified backlog that the team's working on. And this is what we would call a software delivery pipeline. So literally taking it from the code check-in to getting the software out to production and being able to monitor the usage and how users are actually interacting with that software. And so this is where business agility really comes into play. So by setting up these software delivery pipelines, it allows us to react to customer requests, changes in some of these feedback loops to make sure that we're building a product that our customers want to pay for. So all this sounds great, but what could possibly go wrong? Well, in our experience in helping customers through their DevOps enablement journey, there's a couple of key areas that we typically see them running into. First is cultural habits. So as you start to build and deploy software much quicker to production, that also then changes the way in which we think about creating software, how the business prioritizes those capabilities, and that takes a while in some cases to change some of those cultural habits and how you're prioritizing the capabilities needed. Getting leadership support and buy-in to this process is obviously key, because in a lot of cases we're changing some fundamental processes that may have been in place for quite some time. And I would say in addition to that, it's important to think about addressing how you're going to pull some of the team members to be a part of this transformational effort to get it started and out of the day-to-day support of the applications they may have. From an infrastructure perspective, I would say one of the biggest challenges we've seen is when today a lot of organizations who are living on-premise are using a shared infrastructure model where they're basically trying to maximize the hardware and provide some cost savings when it comes to software licenses. And that was great and it solved a particular challenge, but where it hinders the DevOps enablement efforts is that we want to be able to deploy these applications on demand, push those out frequently, in some cases multiple times a day. And shared infrastructure creates a challenge because now I'm not just testing my application, I have to verify and coordinate with other teams, other applications that may be affected by these changes. I would say the last consideration that we typically run into is automated testing. And for a lot of companies, they have some testing in place. A lot of times it's just manual testing. Very few organizations have a comprehensive automated testing effort. And even in those cases, unless it's a new greenfield product, you have legacy systems that you're trying to provide that same coverage and quality to. So this goes not only to the automation efforts, but also the environments that are needed to support it. A lot of times you see drift between our dev, test, and production environments as far as changes that were made. And so we need to be able to streamline that and make sure that we have consistency so that we have good test results. And then last but not least, for our business analysts, our testers, they need tools as well to produce that same capability, that same automation testing effort to help support our DevOps initiatives. So it begs the question then, how do we address automated testing? Well, a couple of key things to mention here. First of all, developers typically don't want to test. And so we know that we've got to focus their efforts on building kind of the unit test level where it's going to help them validate the technical capabilities of the software. And the other challenge we see is that testers typically can't code. And so how do we address both of those scenarios and leverage the tool sets and evaluate tool sets that are available to us? So consistency, reusability of our test cases is obviously something that we also consider with this, and that we want to have a tool set that's going to allow us to create tests, but also leverage those in various ways, not only within our application, but even across applications. So as many of you may be familiar with, modern applications today are being built with several different types of technologies and architectural styles, from single page applications, obviously a lot of mobile app development still taking place. But one of the biggest areas that we've seen growth within is obviously the API side of things. So a lot of products now are being built, whether they're legacy or greenfield applications, are being built with APIs in mind. And so we need to have the ability to test and regression test those APIs, because not only are the mobile and web apps dependent on that, a lot of times we have integration points with customers who also need to, or are consuming those APIs to build out their own applications. That also ties back into there's various data sources, and not, it used to be we just dealt with relational databases and we knew how to handle that very well. And over the past several years, the non-relational data stores have grown in popularity, and so that creates some new challenges for us to deal with when it comes to test data management. And so you've probably seen this testing triangle before, where we want to focus most of our efforts in kind of that unit testing arena, because those are the fastest tests to run. They quickly validate whether or not we've broken anything from a technical standpoint. And then as we kind of move up that pyramid stack, where we get into the service testing, again, referencing kind of those integration points and those APIs that our customers are able to tie into, all the way up to the UI testing. And so where we want to focus that effort in relation to the various testing angles we look at. So when we work with customers, one of the things they ask us is, well, how do we know what tools we should select? So we kind of walk them through an evaluation matrix, and we look at a couple of key things. One is, what's the current skill sets of the teams? The types of applications you're building are important because, again, if you have a variety of different application types, having a tool set to support that, so we don't have 10 different tools we're trying to deal with, is also important. Testing as a culture is always something that is it comes into play because just even the perspective on how much automated testing should we have in place, what's the right level, and is it something that can be easily integrated into the team structures of today, as well as not only the learning curve and costs are obviously factors as well. So we kind of walk them through this decision matrix where we can kind of look at these different tools and capabilities objectively, rather than just taking personal bias and if somebody worked with a particular product, they really like it. Let's really kind of balance this out for your organization and make sure that you're making the right tool set selection that best fits your needs. So that's kind of a brief overview of kind of how we walk through the testing side of it. I'm going to turn it over to Mike now. He's going to walk through a demo and show you how do we take TestArchitect and bring that into that software delivery pipeline to help us enable continuous delivery of the software product we have.
All right, thanks, John. So we're going to talk about how TestArchitect really fits into continuous delivery. So we've already discussed how this digital transformation is really changing organizations to really need to be able to deliver software more efficiently and effectively. And like John said, one of the key challenges to that is making sure that we can do it with quality. And automated testing is a really big piece of that to ensure that we can deploy on a more frequent basis without lowering the bar for quality. And with TestArchitect's a tool that really addresses a number of the concerns that John brought up and really provides a great tool to use for this kind of processes. So first and foremost, it's a action-based testing or keyword-based testing tool, so no coding experience is required. If you haven't seen what that looks like, I'll show that here in just a minute to give you kind of a quick overview of the tool there. It's also a common tool that we can use across the UI, API level, and mobile. So it's really one tool for the entire team to learn instead of having to learn all these different scripting and coding tools for each of the different kind of platforms. We can just do it all in one. We also get benefits of creating maintainable and reusable tests by some of the artifacts that are inside of TestArchitect, and we'll be showing that here in the demo too. And then the last piece, kind of the core of this talk, is really how it integrates with your CD pipeline and how we can make it as part of the software delivery pipeline to really ensure we have that quality as we're going to production. So the first thing is, how does that really fit into this? So this is kind of a watered down version of the software delivery pipeline graphic that John showed. And as you can see, we're basically starting with dev, deploying to the dev environment as part of the application software delivery pipeline. We're not only deploying the application, but we're gonna make sure the infrastructure is all there. And once those are in place, we wanna validate that there's no issues, but we need to do it in a quick way. So really from TestArchitect's perspective, that's a great candidate to run our UI smoke test, and then also the API test within TestArchitect, because those run really fast too. And we wanna try to keep this entire application software delivery pipeline down to be able to run within like 10 to 20 minutes there. So once those tests are passing, that's really our quality gate to whether or not the application goes into test. And basically we repeat the same process from dev there. So we're going to deploy the infrastructure and the application there. You can see here we can also rerun the same smoke test and API tests. In our example for the demo, we're not going to do that, but we have a lot of cases where we are doing that, because one of the key reasons for doing that is, the data in test is going to be a lot different than in dev. So makes sense to do that there. And then we're going to repeat it again for prod. And again, in prod, we can also run that. We have several clients that are running like a post-production validation with automated tests and TestArchitect. So a great way to really validate, once it is in production, that everything's running fine. So that's the application software delivery pipeline. Again, the goal there is really to keep that to like a 10 to 20 minute process, so we can go to production as early and often as we like. Now, But in addition to that is, as we start getting more and more UI tests and more API tests, is we're not gonna be able to run those in line with this process in the time. So we wanna still build out that automation because we still need to know that we're not breaking anything from a regression standpoint. And in that perspective, we have basically a nightly regression software delivery pipeline that takes all the feature tests and scenario tests and basically runs those in any number of environments, dev, test, and prod, and then bringing back the results there. So that's really how we can basically leverage TestArchitect across those two different pipelines to ensure that we're having the quality at all times. So the demo itself is going to be how we're basically utilizing TestArchitect and Visual Studio Team Services, which is basically the SaaS version of Team Foundation Server. I'll just do a quick intro to that in part of the demo, but that's really the tool we're using to really manage all of our work from the requirements to production. And in this case, this shows how we're integrating TestArchitect with that. So over on the left, you can see we're basically utilizing TestArchitect to be the tool where we can author all of our tests, and those will both be the UI and API tests. Those will go into the TestArchitect repo. And then from a VSTS standpoint, we'll basically set up the software delivery pipeline there. And then when it's time to execute the test, it'll actually run those on these test agent machines that we have already built out. And these are actually, in this case, running in Azure. And the really nice thing about that is we can shut those down when they're not being utilized to really save on a cost perspective. So as we'll show in the software delivery pipeline, we'll actually spin that up as the beginning of the test, run all the tests, and then shut it down at the end. And then that'll run the test against the website. And the real key piece there is that we can basically use the same process to run across different environments, and then also different browsers. If you want to run an IE, Firefox, or Chrome, we can basically utilize this process to do all of that. So that's really the kind of perspective there. So let's go in and take a look to see what that actually looks like. So if you haven't seen TestArchitect, I'm going to go ahead and open up that tool here. And so in TestArchitect, you'll see over on the left are all of our artifacts. This is the main document tab. So we'll go ahead and just create a real simple test just to show you how easy this is and very familiar the interface will look. So you can see it's a very Excel-like interface with the usual columns and rows. And in here we can just start doing a lot of free text to really start creating the test. So what TestArchitect has is over 400 built-in actions to allow us to interact with any type of interface we want to, from a web page to Windows app to a database. So if we're trying to test a website and we want to actually test against and do something on there where we interacted, click's a very common one. You can see it brought down a drop-down list of options for me. So I get an IntelliSense-like experience there, so I don't have to remember everything. And not just with their standard stuff. Here you can see I've already set up a window, which is essentially just a page. I have my login page, and then I have all the controls already mapped on there too. So I can basically say, I want to, on my login page, do that control. And one of the things you can do is there's these optional items if we want to do maybe a right click or something like that. We don't really need those in this case. So that's really the example there. The other nice thing is that we can do is we can utilize repeatable or reusable actions that we create that make sense to both from a technology standpoint, like initialize. This will set up like the browsers and really set the environment up to run the test, but also business processes like the login user. And here you can specify the username and password here. And then we can even go into those controls if we want to see what those are. So I can go in and you can see these custom actions are really just made up of multiple other actions. And these are all ones that interact with the page. But I just wanted to briefly show that to you. The one last thing before I jump right in is I mentioned that you can do the API testing. This is the example of what an API test looks in TestArchitect. We won't have too much time to go through this here in this example, but you can see it's a very nice tool for interacting with both SOAP and REST APIs there to really provide a lot faster. If you can get under the interface of the site to create the tests, it's a really good way to do that. And then the last thing is our interface entities. Again, we leverage that already. This is the login page, and this is what represents either a page or an area of the application. And then you see we have these different controls on the page that we want to interact with mapped, and we can basically hook to those in various ways, like the ID, and then if we have to, like the XPath or something else. So And just a real quick overview of that, but we just wanted to kind of set the stage here. So basically we'd be creating the test, getting that checked in, and then getting that incorporated with our software delivery pipeline. So once we have it in our software delivery pipeline or ready to go in there, we can basically interact with it through VSTS. Again, this is our kind of our one-stop shop for managing our projects. We have our dashboards to really see from a quality standpoint where we're at. We have the ability to store all of our code other than the TestArchitect code in here, whether for the application, so all the developers work from that. All of our teams work from our standard backlogs of items that you can see here. And then we also have the test hub for managing all of our test cases that we could do through here. And then last is the build and release. So this is where we can set up our CI, our continuous integration builds, to basically have the latest code, both application code and testing code, all put together into a release that we can use for application. So I did get alert earlier that something did break. So we want to go ahead and investigate this. One of the key things is this is our application pipeline. So this is, you can see, like I mentioned, is those tests have to pass before we can go into the test environment, which is that second box. So there's a lot of people ready to start testing the application, but can't because we've got a failure. So we need to look at that and be really on top of that very quickly there. So the first thing we can do is come in here to the actual release and see from a testing perspective, 2 out of the 3 tests passed. So if we come and look at the test, you can see our 2 APIs test passed, but our actual smoke test failed. And you can see down here, I have the reports, the HTML reports from TestArchitect. So the nice thing about that is you can see is it actually has 2 of them, because one of the options I've turned on in case we run into any flaky tests is it'll actually retry any failed test. And then you see here, in this case, it failed twice, so there probably is an issue. So we can basically click on the actual report itself, and then you can see we can open that. And then from that perspective is we get the TestArchitect report that we can see, and then we can drill down to see what's actually the issue. And in this case, we get actually, it almost gives us the answer to what's wrong. No matching UI for the email field. You can see it's mapped to ID username, and it says go check to see what that definition is there. And one of the things we've turned on is the screenshots, which is really nice because there's a lot of times when we're running these unattended on different machines, it's kind of hard to see maybe what the current state was of the page when the error happens. You can see here, we can't really see anything because it can't get a hold of this field in this case. So let's just take a quick look at our current page. Let me refresh it to make sure we have the latest version of it that was just changed. I can just easily come out here and do a quick inspect on it, and you can see the ID did change now to email over here on the right. So we're kind of like, okay, well, you know, one of the things we can see to kind of help drive that is we can look at the different commits that were part of this. And sure enough, there was a work that was done that changed the username to email. So you can see how that stuff correlates and how we can actually see the issue. So to fix it, really all we have to do is come back into our login page, go ahead and check this out, and then I can go change this ID now to match what the testers did see, or I'm sorry, what the developers changed it to. Check that back in, and I can either wait now until the developers kick off another change, or I can actually kick off a whole new release at that point. So I'll go ahead and kick this off. We probably won't have time to quite see the end of it, but we'll go ahead and run that through, and you can see here that would just basically kick it off, and now you can see we've got a brand new one that started to make sure we can go through dev, test, and prod. So we'll come back to that if we have a little time at the end, but I really wanted to just show you real quick what is made up of that software delivery pipeline. So as you can see, the software delivery pipeline starts with a build. That is this artifact here, the deliver more CI, stands for continuous integration. So every time code's checked in, this will basically kick off and create a new package with all of that. Then we have our dev, test, and prod environment. We basically have to go through all of it. The one thing here to note is for prod, we do have a pre-approval standpoint. And then again, our gate to get into test is really those automated tests. So let's drill in and see what that looks like. So as you can see here, this is my dev environment of what I'm actually doing. So the first step here is basically deploying the infrastructure of this. So it's going to deploy that all out there. It's going to create the web app for this app to be hosted in. Then it's going to deploy the web app. We're then going to deploy the APIs out to that. And then we're going to start our testing VMs. Like I mentioned earlier, our testing VMs are currently turned off to really save cost on that. And that's what we can basically turn on the fly as part of this. Once that agent is ready, then we'll go ahead and execute our smoke and API tests. So at that point, then we can basically make sure our testing platform's on those machines. Then we can start executing the tests. And one of the things I mentioned earlier too is we can actually rerun failed tests as part of this. And you can see right now I just have it set to 1. And again, the more you up that, the more it'll actually take if you have a lot of failing tests. But you can also control the percentage of what you want to run there. And then the last step is to shut that down after all the tests have done. And you can see we've seen the results of that. If we look at see what our test environment is, our test environment, like I mentioned, we're not actually running the test in that. We're just basically repeating the deployment steps. So once all our testing it succeeds, we'll go ahead and then have the application and infrastructure then deploy it to that. The one last thing I just wanted to show is that is what we have. I mentioned that's our top application, Software STP. There is the nightly regression STP, and you can see for the past few nights that also succeeded. This has basically our full run of tests. As you can see, if we come up here to the testing tab, we've got 11 tests passing in this instance, and this will include basically all of our different UI tests from that perspective. So this will definitely handle all these different login scenarios and registration scenarios, so we can make sure that nothing's broken, and we can see over time how that's run. So the test is going to take a little bit longer than that, but we wanted to leave just a little bit of time at the end if you have any questions or anything to add there. But that's really how TestArchitect can fit into the software delivery pipeline. Is there anything you wanted to add, John? So I think that's really from the demo perspective. So we just kind of like to open it up now, and Christine, we can turn it back to you to kind of, if there are any questions on the chat line, we can be happy to answer at this point.
Sure. So I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to enter their questions, but I just want to say on behalf of everyone today, thanks for your time, Mike and John. You've really shed a lot of light on DevOps and continuous delivery. Just wanted to say, for more information on DevOps enablement solutions, you can email John and Mike directly at contactus@deliveron.com or call 402-238-1399. For more information on how LogiGear and TestArchitect can help you with your continuous testing journey, you can download TestArchitect Team for free and start automating today. To learn more about LogiGear's continuous testing services, you can email sales@LogiGear or call 650-572-1400. So now we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. I seem to have a few questions. One that we have right now is, how does TestArchitect fit into TFS and release management components?
Sure. So we were showing VSTS, which is basically the cloud version of TFS. So TFS is basically the on-prem version, Team Foundation server, of almost the exact same thing. And there's some different versions of that, and it's changed a little bit over the years. But essentially, when we're setting this up, it's the same web-based interface to create the builds and releases. So from a user standpoint, it's really hard to even tell anymore if we're using the on-prem version of TFS or the cloud version of VSTS. We're basically setting up these in very similar ways. We're basically going to this web interface, creating the build, creating the release, adding those paths and steps like we showed to execute that. And then we can still leverage the cloud to run the test, even if we're using the on-prem version of TFS. We can still run the tests out in Azure or on on-prem VMs or whatever you have set up, we can run those.
Oh, I have another. Are we able to sync test results between TestArchitect and TFS?
Yeah, great question. So absolutely. So this is the test results with the test cases linked to this. We can also see the results over in the test hub, but it still reports back to TestArchitect. So if we want to use any of the reporting tools within TestArchitect, they have a couple of the nice dashboarding and reporting tools. The results are there. So the results are actually in both in TFS or VSTS and in TestArchitect at all times, which just makes it really nice.
Here's one more. How do you set up software delivery pipelines?
Okay, yeah, so basically in this case, I was really showing an existing one that's already set up. I guess I've got the screen up right here. I could just click on it. So we can basically create a new software delivery pipeline by creating a new release definition in VSTS. And one of the things you can do is basically choose from a number of different templates that you can go from. but then basically you just add the steps that you need to. In our case, we did need to add a couple particular testing tasks to actually run the automated tests, but that's really how you can set those up.
Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today. A copy of the recording will be sent within the next 24 hours and posted online. Please be sure to look for it. We'll answer any remainder questions afterwards. Thanks, you guys.